Joker Folie Deux, or Joker 2 as I'm going to refer to it as in the video to avoid sounding like an idiot, continues the story of Arthur Fleck, who after the events of the last film is incarcerated at Arkham State Hospital and is awaiting trial for his criminal actions. There, he meets Lee Quinzel, aka Harley Quinn played by Lady Gaga, and the two embark on a musical romance full of chaos, violence, and clownery. Now, the first Joker from 2019 is a movie that I enjoyed quite a bit, but in all honesty have never loved. To me, it was a subpar script that was elevated by an Oscar-worthy lead performance, god-tier cinematography, and a hauntingly memorable score. People have talked to death about how all of its story beats were borrowed from Taxi Driver and King of Comedy, and I'm inclined to agree with them. Only it managed to replicate those better stories in mere broad strokes without any trace of the subtlety or complexities that made those two classics so great. I will say that in preparation for the sequel, I went back and rewatched 2019's Joker and did find myself enjoying it quite a bit more than I had previously. That's all to say that I was going into this theater actually excited for the follow-up story. I was not someone who was actively rooting against it. As someone who did like the first film, I was excited at the prospect of seeing the great acting and technical components of it now in service of an original idea. And if you go back and rewatch that first one, there was a heavy emphasis placed on music. That infamous bathroom dance that Arthur does is a way for him to escape from the stressing and anxiety he's feeling in that moment. So to me, it seemed like a natural step to infuse that musical aspect to the story in a larger degree. And I can imagine that Warner Brothers Studios was more than willing to let director Todd Phillips do whatever the heck he wanted to do with this follow-up, as he was able to take that low-budget psychological thriller and create a $1 billion sensation which garnered both critical praise and award nominations. And boy, did he use all of that creative capital to swing for the fences. It's funny that I watched Megalopolis last week, because I see similarities in the way that both directors were given creative freedom. And while I have no doubt that Joker Folie Deux is going to get no shortage of haters, I have to admit that I respect Todd Phillips for going this bold with the sequel. In a behind-the-scenes featurette, actor Joaquin Phoenix said that he didn't want to play it safe, and he most certainly didn't do that here. Because Joker 2 is bold, it's creative, it's gorgeous, and it's also a mess. I've always felt that the first Joker was more of a standalone origin tale for this version of the character, and that a sequel wasn't mandatory. But in the event that they were making a Joker 2, I could imagine no shortage of directions to take it in. You could have doubled down on the Arkham setting and created a Shawshank-style prison tale. The sisters never laid another hand on the Joker after that day. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. You could have made the entire movie a trial and do a deep dive into the complexities of Arthur's psychological condition. You can't handle the clown! You could have brought in a romantic counterpart and go all in on the romance. Or you could have gone nuts and committed to a full-blown musical. Any of these concepts could have served as a solid basis for a sequel, but instead, the film tries to do all of them at once and ends up crumbling under the weight of all these different ideas. Surprise, surprise, Joaquin Phoenix is phenomenal. His acting as both Arthur and the Joker is just as solid as it was in the prior installment. But if I'm being honest, I felt that his performance here had a lot more complex subtleties. He wasn't just crazy for crazy's sake. The Joker aspect of his character is made out to be a separate part of his psyche, and the ramifications of that duality was some of the most interesting stuff in the movie. It actually did touch on some of the issues that I had with the way his character was handled in that first one. Lady Gaga was fine. She wasn't bad by any means, and I did buy the chemistry between the two, but you could tell that there was so much left on the cutting room floor with her rendition of Harley. There are entire scenes that you could see in the trailer that are just not present in the final product. Damn, man. What is it with recent comic book movies butchering their theatrical releases? If you're going into Folie Deux, primed and ready for the quintessential Mad Love adaptation come to life, you are going to be disappointed. Now, I will say that there were reveals and directions that she takes later on in the movie that I found quite interesting, but again, there wasn't enough time spent to flesh these things out in a cohesive way. Instead, we are subjected to numerous musical sequences that I felt were completely superfluous. Just to reiterate, I wasn't against this being a musical. If anything, that direction felt like an organic continuation based off of the style from the first movie. But by the time the third or fourth musical sequence started to happen, I gotta admit, I started checking my watch. They were just boring. I understand the connotation that they were meant to be a break from the harsh reality being endured by Arthur and Lee, but they are handled without any sense of pizzazz and just seemed lifeless. We could be in the middle of a conversation that's genuinely compelling, and it's all ruined by them starting to sing a new tune. I have no doubt that a better cut of Joker 2 exists, which restores all of the deleted scenes and cuts out the musical stuff entirely. Now it sounds like I'm being overly negative, but I'm not saying that this movie is a complete piece of trash. Clown trash, to be exact. I did find a lot to love here. The cinematography, for example, was staggering. This was shot on digital, and although I usually prefer film, I can't deny that this is one of the best looking movies I've seen all year. Every location, from dingy Arkham to the Grand Courthouse, has a sense of tangibility. And in a time where these kinds of movies are starting to look like Super Bowl commercials, I appreciate that extra effort. The themes that are focused on here are also quite compelling. I won't delve too deep into spoilers, but I love the way that Arthur's condition is explored and the way that it exists within the media landscape of the setting. It serves as a sort of meta-commentary on people's reactions to the first one, but in a way that doesn't compromise the story of Arthur. I've seen some people say that Joker 2 doesn't really have enough plot to sustain itself, and I have to disagree. The problem was there were numerous concepts that were being juggled. I just wish they chose one or two of these to focus on. And I will say that it all builds to a conclusion that I kind of hated. I could see this sort of ending working on paper, but the way that it was handled in the final product just left a bad taste in my mouth. And by the time the credits started rolling, I actually did feel kind of pissed. Hey, maybe it would be better handled in the director's cut. Hashtag release the Phillips cut? So in conclusion, Joker 2 is a mixed bag. I found quite a lot of good to enjoy, and even things that I felt were handled better than in the previous movie. However, it is all in service of a jumbled narrative that traded pivotal character building scenes in favor of pointless musical ones. If you love the first film, then you'll hate this one, and I completely get it. But as someone who thought the first film was just alright, I have to say that I didn't hate Folie, Deux. I was just disappointed by it. I'm gonna give Joker 2 a C.